Hi guys. Back to another YouTube tutorial. This time on HematPath. The last tutorial is still there on my channel. It was on pediatric cytopathologies, the pediatric lesions that you come across, the epithelial lesions basically, which was not very big because there are not many epithelial malignancies otherwise that you come across in pediatric population. So that is there on my channel, which was the last thing that I uploaded, and now I'm back with a HematPath tutorial. Now I got a request from someone who's a very good student. I must say she asks very good questions whenever she asks me on Messenger. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Lama. She wanted, if I'm not pronouncing it correctly, then I'm sorry. You wanted me to make a YouTube video on approach to acute leukemias, and basically a postgraduate level video where you would want to understand the difference between the two types, myeloid and lymphoid. So actually I was in the process, I was following a pattern starting from the non-neoplastic hematopath lesions and going to the malignancies. So after this, actually I had a video of IBMF planned, that is inherited bone marrow failure syndromes. But you know what I'm going to do is, by the end of the month I am going to make a short tutorial for you and for all the other postgraduates who want this, on approach to the case, to a case of leukemia. That is a pathological approach, a clinico-pathological approach to be exact. As if you are sitting in an OPD, or if you're sitting in your lab and you get a sample. So I would be starting from when the patient comes to you in the OPD to what the lab sees. This is how I'm going to go about it. And I'm also going to be giving you the diagnostic points that you can use to differentiate the two types of blasts that you see at your level when you are checking the peripheral smear. However, the individual advancements, the WHO changes, the individual leukemia, I would be dealing with as per order of what I have planned, so that I don't miss out any topic. Because if I jump from hemolytic anemias to acute leukemias and then start taking up individual leukemia, then you're going to be missing out on a lot of important non-neoplastic hematological disorders. So I will make a video on approach. I am going to be discussing your doubts which you've asked me in the message, and hope that helps you. And you can still ask me for further clarifications. I'll again make a video if you don't understand. But individual leukemias, be it the genetic mutation ones, the secondary leukemias, or AML-M0, M1, M2, the individual leukemia in detail, I will be taking as per the sequence I have imagined, I have planned, so that you don't miss out on anything which is important in hemat. However, by the end of this month, I will be, interjecting with a video which will be away from non-neoplastic hematopathology, and that would be on approach to acute leukemias, and then to differentiate between lymphoid and myeloid. Fine. So give me some time to make that. So I want to make it as easy, and I want to cover as much of pitfalls, as many of pitfalls that I can, so that it becomes easy for you to follow. So this would be a this is just for the sake of completing the hemolytic anemias. I have already shown you the HPLC. I have discussed that with you. I have also showed you the basic picture of a hemolytic anemia, which remains the same throughout the spectrum. So I would just tell you, say in 5 minutes, not more than that, important aspects of sickle cell disease which you should know from the exam point of view. Okay, so moving ahead. Look, the first question that as a PG you should know is the difference between the trait, the anemia, and the disease. The trait is something which is incidental. You might not even know that you have sickle cell, or the patient has sickle cell. It was detected incidentally, or a very mild anemia was there. So the hemoglobin level is somewhere between 10 to 13 always. And we all know that sickling sets in when the body is under stress, right? Oxidative stress. So a trait person might not even manifest symptoms except mild anemia to nothing. And or he might be diagnosed incidentally. He was getting investigated, HPLC was done thinking something else, and then you suddenly see, okay, this person has sickle. And this is a heterozygous condition. One normal and one S gene is there. So anemia is just the loss of RBCs, the diminution in the number of RBCs due to hemolysis, leading to some symptomatology which is related to the anemia. Disease is the entire spectrum of symptoms you get because of sickling, which is the pain crisis that you get, the vascular crisis, the hemolytic crisis that you have. There are three crises in sickling. Finally, the aplastic crisis that you have, which you should know about. You will be asked clinically. Patient might present with the pain. There may be ischemia, infarcts with anemia and hemolysis. So that entire spectrum becomes the disease. Okay. Now, I have taken most all my pictures and the tables are from Tejinder Singh Sir's book. These are not my own. I have already in many videos given you that disclaimer that I'm not using my images. I'm using images from textbooks and net. So basically, I just wanted to show you this entire pathogenesis is given in Sir's book, which you should know about. You should remember, learn, because the end result of sickling of RBC, when it becomes like a sickle, a हसिया to those people who speak in मतलब जो हिंदी वाले, हसिया is जो farmers use करते हैं sickle to cut crops. So when it becomes sickled, then it cannot flow freely through the blood vessels, leading to it getting occluded. It occludes the lumen of the vessel, एक के ऊपर एक ये इकट्ठा होते जाते हैं, and then that causes vascular stasis, that causes infarcts, and then too many infarcts will either lead to body performing something known as autosplenectomy. It in a way it the spleen totally stops working because of so much excess of infarction, and of or a stage before that is hyposplenism. So the treatment of this is that we remove, we try not to put body into too much oxidative stress. We tell the person not to do it. Second is we remove the spleen. Hence, in such cases, even in ITP, when we talk about splenectomy, or in sickling crisis, when we talk about splenectomy, pneumococcal vaccination is mandatory in such cases, because spleen also has a role to play in immunity, which gets compromised. Hence, we have to supplement the body with vaccines so that even in absence of a spleen, the body can perform its function of immunity. Okay. And how it does, it's a part of the reticuloendothelial system. The T cells, there are B cells. I'm not going into detail of how a spleen makes and helps in, production of and maybe antibodies or T cells, the fighter cells and the helper cells. You can go ahead and read it yourself. There are lymphoid follicles present in the spleen, and but what it does is reduction of capsular organisms against the resistance decreases, and hence we need to vaccinate the person. So you need to have an idea of what happens when the oxygen goes low. Oxygen goes low, the process of sickling occurs because of this denatured S hemoglobin which is present, and the mutation does not the mutation compromise the integrity of the RBC. So when oxygen lowers, because of this mutation, they cannot take, the RBCs cannot fight this oxidative damage, and they become like a sickle. And when this sticks to the vessel, it causes all those disease spectrum. Now the PS of any hemolytic anemia will show you almost the same picture. Hemolysis, you'll get fragmented cells, you can get target cells, you can get bizarre poikilocytes. All of that you can see here. Fragmented cells, you can get bizarre poikilocytes, target cells, something like a teardrop. What these are cells which are starting to sickle, and this is a full-blown sickle. You don't get so many sickles in a smear routinely. You might get one or two, which might lead you to suspect a sickle cell anemia, and then you go ahead and you perform either the sodium metabisulfite test or HPLC, whatever you want, and then you can diagnose sickle cell anemia, and the iron stores remain almost normal. See, this is sodium metabisulfite test showing such beautiful sickling. Of course, you can go ahead with HPLC. I've already shown you HPLC, so I'm not going in detail. Trait is some, see, you can see the adult hemoglobin levels remain normal, A2 A1 levels remain almost normal, slightly increased F maybe, the A levels are normal, and trait has a normal A chain and a S chain. So this is something that is incidental and you might miss. There's another hemoglobin which is HbE, which you miss in routine practice, and you might detect it incidentally. You were thinking something else and it comes out to be HbE. And last time I told you A2CEO. AE precipitates with A2. So when there is a case of HbE, you might get a big A2 band. Similarly, SDG. So there might be a hemoglobin G which is precipitating in the region of S in your HPLC over here, and you might think it is a sickle cell hemoglobin, but it is not. And there comes the role of molecular diagnosis as well as immunofixations. This chart is very self-explanatory, given in Sir's book, where you compare the homozygous SS gene and SA, which is heterozygous trait. Less of symptoms, more of hemoglobin A. Compared to the homozygous, you get more of hemoglobin S, that is 70 to 90%. Hemoglobin is almost normal. Smear appears almost normal. Fine. So it is difficult to gauge that it is a trait sickle cell. It is an incidental finding. And this I've told you should remember that SDG, O, LEPO, they elute in the same area, and of course H and BARTs are very fast moving hemoglobins. So on an HPLC, this is electrophoresis graph. On an HPLC, you will get a very quick peak, and then the routine peaks, and then you think, okay, this could be HPH. I've already taken all this. There are variants. There's D, there is G, there's Philadelphia, Punjab, Sindh. There are so many variants. What I wanted to just tell you is that see, this is this is a hand of someone who's suffering from a hemolysis crisis with a lot of redness and erythema compared to a normal hand. Okay, this is just a clinical indication. What I want to tell you is that over a spectrum of cases, the picture of hemolytic anemia remains the same. When I give you a PS, sickle is one of those hemoglobinopathies that you can diagnose on a PS if there is frank sickling, or if you are suspecting and you perform a metabisulfite test. Similarly, on reticulocyte staining, you can diagnose the golf ball appearance of HbH disease. You can, of course, also diagnose G6PD by seeing a blister cell. You can diagnose derangement in LFT or A beta lipoproteinemias by seeing an acanthocyte, or a renal impairment by seeing a uremia. What you can't do is diagnose an entire spectrum of hemolytic anemias by the PS. You can't differentiate between beta trait or frank beta major or alpha too much by getting just a peripheral smear. Reason being, all of these are hemolytic. So the picture that they give you is hemolytic. You'll get fragmented cells, NRBCs, maybe targetemia also occurs with IDA, although not to that extent. Fine. Hence, you need to correlate what you see. If you are getting a smear, I get that a lot of times in where I'm working. I get a leukoerythroblastic picture in a hemolytic case. So what I can just tell the clinician is that this is leukoerythroblastic A, hemolytic B malignancy. I go for a bone marrow, but before that I go for an HPLC. So you need to calculate 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3, rather than just looking at the PS and saying, oh, this is sickle, oh, this is HbH, oh, this is HbE. You can't do that. So that is why I'm just telling you that just see a smear. This is, I'm wrapping up hemolytic now. So just see a smear, and by whatever I've told you, there are only few cells which are very pathognomonic of a particular lesion. I just enumerated those. Rest, you can just give an idea that this is hemolytic or not. That's it. And of course, COVID is also giving you a lot of data on Twitter, where they are saying that, or some papers are being, submitted, being published, where they are saying mushroom-like RBCs are seen in COVID hemolysis. COVID has hemolysis. Some papers say it does not have. So what, by seeing the PS, why this part was important is by PSA you can tell that it is hemolysis. B, you can guide as to which hemolysis it is. Rest, you have to take help of HPLC, immunofixations, electrophoresis, and of course clinical, to reach to an actual diagnosis. Sometimes the clinician thinks that it is a malignancy, and there comes the role of this chapter. If you are seeing fragmented cells in the PS, the reticulocyte count is high, and the picture is leukoerythroblastic, it cannot be marrow infiltration. Why? Initial phases, yes, it might be, but why it can't be a full bone marrow infiltration? Reason is reticulocyte won't respond. There won't be too many immature RBCs in the PS when there are no RBCs being formed in the marrow. So if the marrow is getting infiltrated by a metastasis, or if there is leukemia developing, you won't get this kind of a picture. You get a leukoerythroblastic picture in myelofibrosis, yes, but the retic count is not very high. So a leukoerythroblastic picture, fragmented RBCs, polychromasia, you can guide the clinician who's thinking that it is a malignancy into the direction of hemolysis, which does not need a bone marrow every time. You can go for an HPLC and save time and money, and the treatment, a proper treatment you can give to the patient. So that is the importance of this topic. So yeah, these are my references. By the textbook is by Sir Tejinder Singh Sir, and a couple of images are from Google. Rest mostly they are from Sir ka book. So I have wrapped up with the hemolytic anemias now, and next the topic that I'll be bringing will be cytopath. But after that, what I'll be taking up would be the approach to acute leukemia and some pitfalls and differences. Then I'll go back to IBMF because I need to finish non-neoplastic benign hematology, and then we can go ahead with the neoplastic ones. So I hope you like it. Thank you.